Dobro. History. Archive.
The frames are still hanging on the walls, empty, for 34 years.
They are magnificent, gilded monuments to absence. It's really something to see.
And this is the story we're diving into today. The largest art heist in history. I mean, 13 works of art valued at $500 million, just gone. Vanished from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston.
Right.
And they weren't just, disappeared. They were meticulously, and I think bizarrely, stolen in a way that just defied every single expectation of what a high-stakes robbery looks like. It left this profound cultural scar.
That image you just conjured, those empty, heavy frames in the Dutch room, that's really the key to understanding this whole deep dive.
It is.
This is the world's greatest unsolved art mystery. It showcases not just, the limits of security, but the really strange, dark reality of the black market, where art functions less as a thing of beauty and, well, more as a commodity of criminal leverage.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We are unpacking the detailed source material you've provided us. We've got the minute-by-minute account of the invasion.
The whole 81 minutes.
A strange and, frankly, contradictory list of objects the thieves chose to take. The rapid, bloody trail that led the FBI straight to the Boston Mafia.
And finally, the decades-long pursuit of the last suspect, the man who insists on taking the $500 million secret to his grave.
Yeah.
And we have information here that it synthesizes years of FBI investigation. It focuses not just on who might have done it, but on the how and, more importantly, the why.
That's what we need to get to.
We need to find the critical nuggets that explain the crime's shocking precision and, on the flip side, why this massive prize remains completely unmovable, unrecovered, 3 decades later.
The timeline is going to be so important here.
Oh, absolutely. The speed of the cleanup, the murders, it contrasts so violently with the calm, methodical execution of the initial theft.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The story begins just after midnight, in the very, very early hours of March 18th, 1990. It's St. Patrick's Day weekend in Boston.
Which means the city is it's a mess.
A city consumed by what our source material accurately calls drunken revelry. The streets were loud, confusing, full of police just trying to keep a lid on things. It was, the perfect atmosphere for a crime that relied on blending in.
That chaos outside was the crucial camouflage. It was perfect for the meticulous planning that happened inside.
Also.
Well, think about it. When you have police visibility at an all-time high, the last thing anyone, including, a couple of young museum guards, the last thing they expect is that the police themselves might be the threat.
All right, so let's jump inside the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It is dead quiet in there.
Total silence.
On the overnight shift are 2 young security guards. We're talking about 23-year-old 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄, who's at the main security desk, and 25-year-old Randy Hestand. He's out making his routine rounds of this massive facility.
And the museum itself is, well, it's a labyrinth. It's designed to feel like Isabella Stewart Gardner's private European palace, not some modern, secure vault.
Right, it's not the...
Not at all. And that isolation, combined with the fact that these were 2 relatively young, you could say probably complacent, guards on a holiday weekend, it's just created an immediate vulnerability.
A vulnerability that gets exploited at precisely 1:24 a.m.
The moment it all starts.
The buzzer rings at the employee entrance. 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄, sitting there at the desk, he looks at the security camera and he sees 2 men standing there. And they are perfectly dressed in what look like real Boston police uniforms.
This is the first, and I would argue the most masterful moment of deception. The caller, speaking over the intercom, uses a line that is just immediately effective. It's calm, it's official.
What's the line?
Boston Police, we got a report of a disturbance on the premises.
And this is where we have to pause, right? We have to put ourselves in 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄's mindset. It's 1:24 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's St. Patrick's Day weekend. A disturbance call from the Boston PD seems like the most logical, the most believable thing in the world, given the chaos outside. He's not suspicious at all. He's cooperative.
And that believability is exactly what leads to his critical error. His one huge mistake.
He buzzes them in.
𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄, against stringent, well-established protocol, buzzes them in. He admitted later he just assumed, given the time and the uniforms, that it was a legitimate police matter.
The moment that door opens, the setup is executed with this chilling efficiency.
It's like clockwork.
The 2 men walk in. The taller one, who's the main speaker, he comes right up to 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄's desk. He initiates the contact. The other guy just hangs back, observing, making sure the scene is secure.
Right.
And the lead cop starts the questioning. Are you alone?
And Abath, still trying to follow some measures procedure, says no, his partner Randy Hestand is out on his perimeter checks.
And what does the thief say?
Immediately, he orders him, get him down here. They know the clock is ticking. Containing both assets, both human shields, is priority number one.
But here is the most brilliant psychological move of the entire night. This is the moment that proves this wasn't just two thugs in costume.
This is the professional touch.
While they wait for Hestand to arrive, the lead cop leans in, and he accuses Abath of a personal crime. He says, "Don't I know you? I think there's a warrant out for your arrest. Can you step out from behind the desk?"
That sentence is it's genius.
Why?
Because it completely redirects Abath's attention. It's no longer about the museum's security. It's about his own immediate legal jeopardy. He's not a guardian of priceless art anymore.
He's just a 23-year-old kid.
A 23-year-old kid suddenly under personal scrutiny by two police officers. He is completely flustered. He later said he was kind of sing-songy, sarcastic about it, while, desperately handing over his ID to prove them wrong.
And crucially, in stepping out from behind that desk to defend himself, to hand over his ID, he moves away from the only silent panic button.
The one thing, the one tool he had.
The thief immediately cuffs him, tells him to put his hands against the wall. Before he can even process what just happened, he's neutralized.
And the timing is perfect. Just as Abath is secured, Hestand arrives, sees his partner restrained, and he shouts, "Officers, why are you arresting me?"
And he doesn't even get a word out before.
He's instantly cuffed as well. And then the act is dropped. Immediately.
The voice changes.
Yeah.
One of the men drops the official facade and just says, "Gentlemen, this is a robbery."
Chilling.
Abath's response is just incredibly human and, frankly, heartbreaking. He says, "We don't get paid enough to get hurt."
Oh, wow.
A profound moment of just immediate surrender.
And this is where the methodical nature of these thieves really takes over. They weren't frantic, they didn't hurt the guards, they were just executing a plan.
Step by step.
They lead Abath and Hestand to the museum's dark, cold basement. They separate them, they handcuff them to solid pipes, and they meticulously wrap their eyes and mouths in duct tape.
They needed them contained.
And comfortable and silent for the long haul. They anticipated being there for over an hour.
And that anecdote about Randy Hestand, investigators always cite this as the key to understanding the sheer control these guys had.
It's such a bizarre detail.
One of the men was dealing with Hestand, and he actually apologized to him. He asked Hestand if the handcuffs were too tight.
And Hestand says yes.
He says yes, and the thief redid them. He loosened the cuffs.
It is the pinnacle of bizarre courtesy. He reassured the guard, saying something like, "Get comfortable, you're going to be here all night. We're sorry we're here. We're not going to hurt you. Just keep your mouth shut."
Which, as the museum's current security director, Anthony Amore, has pointed out, this wasn't kindness.
No, it was a practical tactic. A calm hostage is a compliant hostage. They were managing the trauma, making sure the guards wouldn't try to struggle or scream while they went about their business upstairs.
And they weren't in a hurry at all. The thieves had 81 minutes upstairs.
81 minutes.
Can you imagine? If you're a guard, duct-taped in the pitch-black, cold basement, every second of that 81 minutes must have felt like an eternity. They knew a historic crime was unfolding just above their heads.
And we know exactly when they struck the treasure rooms. At 1:48 a.m., the motion sensors recorded them walking straight into the second-floor Dutch room, the primary target.
So that whole time frame, that 81 minutes, it just confirms they were highly selective. They knew exactly where they were going and what tools they needed.
They had a plan.
And the sounds.
Yeah.
The sounds that must have drifted down.
Yeah.
The source material describes these horrifying grating noises, the protective glass that covered the masterpieces being smashed.
And then immediately after, the sickening sound of a box cutter.
Ugh.
That sound, the sound of priceless canvas being ripped from its wooden stretcher bars, that is the specific moment that $500 million vanishes into the criminal ether.
The fact that they cut the canvases instead of, carefully trying to remove the frames, what does that tell you?
It tells us two things. One, they needed maximum speed to fit the rolled up art into their car. And two, they did not care at all about the irreparable damage to the edges of these masterpieces. They valued the content over the condition. It wasn't about preservation.
And the exit was just as slow, as deliberate. At 2:45 a.m., 81 minutes after Abath buzzed them in, the thieves made their final exit.
They made 2 separate trips to their car with the heavy haul of stolen art.
2 trips.
Which confirms they were calm, they were collected, and they were completely unconcerned about being intercepted. They vanished into the noise of the St. Patrick's Day night, leaving behind the empty frames and an impenetrable silence.
The next morning, of course, the horror is discovered.
A whole new nightmare begins.
The new shift arrives at 8:15 a.m. They find the security desk empty, and eventually the police locate a bath and Hestand still cuffed in the basement.
And when they go upstairs?
The scene is one of total devastation. The empty, gaping frames, some smashed on the floor, others still hanging perfectly on the wall like open wounds.
The initial reaction must have just been shock at the scale of what was missing. I mean, they took masterpieces that fundamentally define the Gardner collection.
It immediately confirmed the thieves were professionals. They understood high culture.
Oh yeah, they went for the grand prizes first.
Absolutely. They stole Rembrandt's Christ in the storm on the Sea of Galilee, which is a profound tragedy because it remains Rembrandt's only known seascape. If you've ever seen that painting, it's visceral, it's dramatic. It's a monumental loss to art history.
And then Vermeer's The Concert. This is probably the most famous piece they took, one of only 36 known Vermeers in existence.
36 in the whole world.
And this is one of them. It's considered the single most valuable unrecovered painting on Earth, easily valued in the hundreds of millions by itself.
Okay, so far the motive seems simple, right? Steal the most valuable, most recognizable items possible. But this is precisely where the story veers violently off the rails.
It's where it stops making sense, as the sources constantly repeat.
Exactly. Because hanging just one room away, easily accessible, was what was then considered the single most valuable painting in the entire collection.
Titian's The Rape of Europa. A sprawling, famous Renaissance masterpiece, instantly recognizable, massively valuable.
They had 81 minutes. They made 2 separate trips to the car, and they walked right past it.
They walked right past the Titian.
Why? I mean, why skip the billion-dollar baby, the most famous, most valuable painting in the house?
And this is the crucial analytical nugget that steered the entire FBI investigation.
The whole thing pivoted on this fact.
It confirms, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this wasn't some opportunistic smash and grab where the thieves just took what looked expensive. They were following a very precise, pre-approved list. Someone, somewhere, had placed a specific order, and the Titian was not on it.
And if we look at that complete list of 13 items, it becomes just profoundly contradictory. It's baffling. On one hand, you have the irreplaceable Rembrandt and Vermeer. On the other hand, they steal 5 small, simple sketches by Degas. Sketches. Why bother with those, given the time pressure?
Well, this is where we can start to build the psychological profile of the collector who commissioned this crime, the Degas sketches. They suggest an interest in the artist's process, right? The intimacy of a working study, rather than just the highly finished, publicly famous work.
So it points to more esoteric insider taste.
Exactly. It's not about the flash. It's about something else.
But the truly baffling selections, the items that are really the signature of the crime, are the final 2. First, an ancient Chinese bronze gu.
And we should probably explain what a gu is for you listening. This is a ceremonial wine beaker. It dates all the way back to the Shang dynasty, around 1200 BC.
Wow.
Think about that span of history. The collector wants a 17th century Dutch seascape, a 17th century Dutch interior, 19th century French sketches, and a 3,200-year-old Chinese artifact.
It's all over the map.
It proves the person ordering this art has tastes that span millennia and absolutely ignore the traditional hierarchy of financial value. It's highly, highly personal.
And then the strangest item of all, a bronze eagle finial.
The finial.
The sources describe it as a relatively valueless ornament that just sat on top of a Napoleonic flag.
And they tried to take the whole silk flag, right? But when they realized it was screwed to the wall with these little metal fasteners, they just gave up on the flag.
And what? They just unscrewed the little eagle ornament on top and took that instead?
Yes. That is the definitive proof of the to-order nature of this heist. The eagle itself is almost worthless on the open market. It has no famous artist attached to it.
But someone, somewhere, valued that specific Napoleonic finial.
Maybe it was a family heirloom or represented some personal military obsession. The point is, the thief was so focused on hitting every item on the list that he chose to spend precious seconds unscrewing a tiny bronze bird rather than grabbing the nearest priceless painting.
The museum's response to this list, it actually underscores the mystery perfectly.
It does.
They're offering a monumental $10 million reward for the return of the 13 masterpieces, but they have a separate, dedicated $100,000 reward just for the return of that eagle finial.
And that $100,000 reward for the finial tells you everything you need to know. The museum security director knows that the eagle is the specific signature of the collector's obsession. If they can trap the finial, they can track the ultimate buyer.
So this wasn't a heist for quick money or for fame.
No, it was a highly personal shopping trip for a powerful, shadowy figure who possessed very, very specific tastes.
Which immediately steers the FBI away from low-level fences and straight toward organized crime. Someone operating on behalf of a major, possibly eccentric, foreign or domestic collector. So who would order such a strange collection? The FBI investigation, after, ruling out the guards, it zeroed in on the most logical supplier for an elaborate Boston crime.
The Boston Mafia.
Of course. But we should briefly go back to the inside man theory just to close that loop because the sources are so contradictory on this.
Right. Investigators spent years looking at 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄, the 2015 video that surfaced showing him letting an unidentified man into the museum 24 hours before the heist. A clear, dry run. That was incredibly damning.
It's hard to look at that footage and not conclude he was setting the stage for what was to come.
It is, but the FBI ultimately shifted. They officially concluded he was, and this is their phrase, too incompetent and foolish to have been the true mastermind.
Too incompetent.
He was just a low-level kid who was either paid off or, tricked.
That phrase, too incompetent, is it's fascinating. It allowed the FBI to publicly move past a potential scandal involving an accomplice guard, focusing instead on the larger criminal organization.
Right. And whether 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄 was truly just a dupe or the FBI simply didn't have enough to charge him, well, the trail went cold on the guard and pointed squarely at organized crime.
And the focus landed on a specific crew run by Carmelo Merlino and specifically on a mobster named Bobby Donati. This is where the crucial strategic aha moment happened for the FBI.
The moment that explained why they stole the art and why the list was so specific.
What was the theory?
The core idea, which the FBI strongly pursued, was that the art wasn't stolen to be sold for generic cash. It was stolen to be traded. It was leverage. It was collateral.
It was hostage material.
Hostage material in the highest sense.
To understand this, we have to briefly set the scene of the Boston underworld in 1990. This wasn't a stable organization. The Mafia was in the middle of a brutal, bloody internal war.
And Donati's boss, a powerful cap regime named Vincent Ferrara, was in jail. A cap regime is essentially a captain or a lieutenant in the mob, a critical position.
So Ferrara was facing a potentially career-ending, maybe life-ending legal situation. Donati, his loyal soldier, was under immense pressure to save his boss's life and position.
The theory suggests Donati organized the Gardner heist as a strategic move, a $500 million bargaining chip. The art was to be used to negotiate his boss's release, or at least to prove his loyalty and save his own skin within the shifting power dynamics of the mob.
It was essentially a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Exactly. A card to be played with rival factions, or maybe even with government informants. The art was taken hostage for political leverage within the criminal underworld, not for simple liquidating value.
But if this was the plan, it went horribly wrong.
Horribly, violently wrong, almost immediately. The government did not negotiate. The intended leverage was never executed. And the Boston underworld, facing massive law enforcement scrutiny and infighting over this failed scheme, began what the sources call a cleaning of its own house.
And this triggered that rapid and chilling chain reaction of blood.
Yes. Within 18 months of the heist, everyone who might have known where that art was immediately located was dead. It was a terrifying, swift purge.
The timeline of the violence is almost surgical.
It is.
First, in February 1991, less than a year after the heist, a man named Jimmy Marks, a career criminal associated with the crew who was reportedly talking at a school about the art.
He was executed in a classic mob hit.
The detail here is so chilling. The sources report that the killer unscrewed the light bulb over Marks's door first.
That's a trademark sign of a professional, calculated hit. It ensures the maximum element of surprise and darkness. Anyone who jeopardized the secret was immediately silenced.
Then, just a few months later, in June 1991, Lenny DiMuzio.
A man the FBI later identified as one of the two men who wore the police uniform and entered the museum.
He was found shot to death.
And the purge just continued into September 1991. George Reisfelder, the man the FBI believes was the other thief, was found dead of a cocaine overdose.
But critically, this was widely suspected by investigators to be a forced hotshot.
Meaning a fatal forced dose. Another brutal method of internal execution masquerading as an accident.
And that same month, September 1991, the alleged mastermind of the whole plan, Bobby Donati.
The man who supposedly orchestrated the entire operation for his boss.
He was found brutally beaten, stabbed, and stuffed in the trunk of his car. The speed and method of these four murders.
Yeah.
It paints a very clear picture of an internal execution designed to bury the secret immediately.
So now the art was completely orphaned.
Exactly. The thieves were dead. The man who orchestrated the leverage attempt was dead. The art was separated from its purpose.
It instantly became a toxic asset, a $500 million problem that was just far too dangerous to move or to sell or even to admit to possessing. And so it was buried, physically and figuratively. And the trail went completely cold.
For almost 2 decades, the case was just silent, cold. The FBI was desperate.
There was that one fleeting moment in the early 2000s, right? Around 2003, a tip suggested the art was being offered in Philadelphia, but the deal it fell through.
And then nothing. For 20 years, no movement.
The breakthrough finally came in 2010. Investigators began interviewing Aline Guarente.
Who was she?
She was the widow of a mobster named Robert Guarente, who had recently died of cancer in 2004. Guarente had been a known associate of the murdered alleged mastermind, Bobby Donati.
And Aline stuns the investigators with a sudden confession. The source notes she blurts out the information,
Which is a sign of genuine, maybe unburdened recollection.
She says that just before her husband died, he told her he had received the paintings and he wanted to pass them to a trusted friend for safekeeping.
His goal was noble in a criminal sense, to ensure the art could provide for me after he was gone.
She claims she was present when the handover happened, not in some dusty vault, but in a very mundane setting.
A hotel parking lot in Portland, Maine. She says she saw her husband hand 2 of the paintings over to his trusted old-time friend.
And that friend, that man who became the last hope, the final living link in this tragic, bizarre chain, was Robert Bubby Gentile, a geriatric Hartford gangster.
And suddenly, the entire mystery had a name and a location.
The FBI was, you can imagine, ecstatic.
Absolutely. They finally had a name and a potential location 22 years after the crime.
So in 2012, they obtained a search warrant, and they raided Gentile's home in Manchester, Connecticut. The expectation was so high that they brought ground-penetrating radar.
And we should elaborate on the radar. I mean, they didn't just walk in and look around. They expected the art to be buried in the foundation, sealed behind walls, or hidden deep in the backyard. This was a full forensic deep dive.
Former FBI photographers later recounted that they had poster boards already printed up, ready for the press conference with the word "recovered" splashed across them.
The level of anticipation was just immense.
But the dramatic climax they had waited 22 years for, it never arrived.
No. They tore the house apart, they dug up the yard, they scanned every inch of the property, and they found absolutely no paintings.
The art had moved, or the confession was exaggerated, or maybe Gentile was just storing the secrets, not the actual canvases.
Right. But the raid was not a complete failure. What they did find was incredibly incriminating.
It cemented Gentile as the keeper of the secrets, even if he wasn't the keeper of the art itself.
First, they found what the sources called a veritable arsenal of weapons. Guns, 5 silencers, ammunition. Enough to charge him immediately. And chillingly, they found police hats and badges.
A direct, circumstantial echo of the 1990 Heist's methodology.
Exactly. It reinforced his criminal history. But the smoking gun, the definitive link, was buried deep in the cluttered basement.
What was it?
They discovered a copy of the Boston Herald newspaper, dated March 19th, 1990, the day immediately following the robbery.
And tucked inside that 22-year-old newspaper
Was a handwritten list of all 13 stolen paintings and their estimated black market values.
That is forensic gold. No one casually possesses a 22-year-old newspaper with a handwritten catalog of the world's most famous stolen art, unless they were intimately connected to the transaction or the storage of that collateral.
The FBI had their man. They had the keeper of the secret, the final living piece of the puzzle.
So Robert Gentile, the geriatric Hartford gangster, was now under intense pressure. The FBI arrested him on the gun charges they found, and they used that leverage to try to force him to talk.
To trade his freedom for the location of the art.
And so began a decade-long, stubborn standoff that defined the final years of this investigation.
It really became a battle of 2 Robert Gentiles in the eyes of the public and the court system.
How so?
Well, on one side, you had the version presented by his lawyer, a feeble old man in his 80s in failing health, complaining about rats running around his prison cell.
Claiming he was being entrapped and persecuted by the FBI purely because of the art.
Right. And then you had the prosecutor's version, painting him as a vigorous career criminal, A man with a documented history of using police uniforms in home invasions.
Meaning the 1990 method was right up his alley.
Exactly. A man who, the prosecutor attested, had repeatedly bragged to other inmates about his intimate involvement and knowledge concerning the Gardner art.
A stark contradiction. But despite the FBI's best efforts at leverage, Gentile refused to budge.
He maintained his old-school code of silence. He just kept saying, I had nothing to do with the paintings. It's a big joke.
The possibility of cooperating and walking away with a $10 million reward wasn't enough to break that code.
Nope. The FBI pulled out all the stops. They administered a polygraph test, which Gentile failed, according to the sources, spectacularly.
What does that mean, spectacularly?
The machine showed a staggering 99.9% probability that he was lying when he was asked direct questions about the location of the art.
And while polygraphs aren't admissible in court,
that result provided the FBI with complete confidence that they had the right man, the man who knew the secret. But knowledge does not equate to recovery. Gentile was old school in the extreme.
he prioritized silence over financial reward or freedom.
Right. Potentially fearing retribution from surviving mob figures, or maybe just refusing to be seen as a rat.
So he served his time for the gun charges, was released, and he remained the last living link to the $500 million mystery. The entire focus of the art world rested on the silence of this one old man in Hartford.
And then the story reaches its inevitable anticlimactic end. On September 17th, 2021, Robert Gentile suffered a stroke and died,
He took the secret to his grave.
ensuring the decades-long silence would persist.
His lawyer's final brief statement summed up that whole decade-long refusal. He denied having the paintings till his death.
Which immediately raises the question of succession, right? Anthony O'More, the chief investigator, he tried to remain hopeful, suggesting that Gentile's death might limit someone else to finally speak.
He insisted Gentile was not the absolute last link.
Right. That he may have passed the secret, or even the art, to another associate. However, the silence since 2021 suggests that the fear surrounding this art is still profound.
And we have to remember the crucial legal detail here, which makes the silence so frustrating.
The statute of limitations for the crime itself ran out decades ago.
Nobody can be charged for the 1990 heist. The FBI doesn't want prosecution, they just want the location. All anyone has to do is make an anonymous phone call and collect the reward.
And that $10 million reward is still actively waiting, along with the separate $100,000 reward just for the return of that specific low-value eagle finial. The money is massive. The legal risk is zero. Yet the code of silence holds firm.
Which brings us back to the museum and the painful legacy of this silence.
When Isabella Stewart Gardner built her collection, her will was crystal clear. Nothing could ever be moved.
So 4 years after the heist in 1994, the museum honored her wishes by rehanging the empty gilded frames as placeholders.
They were intended as symbols of hope, signals that the art was still reserved, that it was still waiting for its return.
But 34 years later, they serve as powerful, silent monuments, testaments to the world's greatest art heist, and to the secret that Robert Gentile, alongside 4 murdered associates, insisted on taking with him. So let's summarize the critical insights we've unpacked in this extensive deep dive. This case is really defined by the precise confluence of 3 elements: deception, deliberation, and death.
The initial phase, absolutely defined by the sophisticated deception, the highly realistic police uniforms, the psychological warrant trick that neutralized the guard.
And the bizarre courtesy of loosening the handcuffs.
Right. All calculated measures to ensure a calm, successful takeover in 81 minutes flat.
They have the incredible deliberation behind that target list. They ignored the obvious treasures like the Titian.
And instead executed a very specific, bizarre catalog Rembrandt, Vermeer, simple Degas sketches, an ancient Chinese beaker, and that relatively valueless eagle finial.
Which confirms it was a strictly two-order crime for an eccentric collector.
And likely tied directly to high-level criminal leverage, fitting that art as hostage theory perfectly.
And finally, the quick, bloody death of the men who executed the plan.
The 2 alleged thieves and the alleged mastermind, all eliminated within 18 months. This rapid mob purge immediately turned the art into a toxic, unmovable asset.
A collateral object that became too dangerous for anyone to touch.
And that extreme violence ensured the secret was buried quickly and deeply within the underworld structure.
And the decade of silence maintained by Robert Gentile, the final stubborn keeper of the secret, it just shows the enduring power of that underworld code. even when faced with overwhelming evidence and the opportunity for freedom and millions of dollars.
So the key takeaway for you, the listener, is the intense complexity of the black market in high-value assets. This was never about simply fencing a canvas for quick cash.
Not at all.
It was about political leverage, collateral, and power within a criminal ecosystem. Art, in this context, functions as a commodity of extreme power, capable of dictating life and death in the criminal underworld long after the executioners are gone.
Which leads us back to the museum floor and our final provocative thought. The only way to get the $10 million reward is to reveal the location of the art. But revealing the location means admitting knowledge of a crime committed by 4 brutally murdered men, the men who started that violent chain reaction. Given that immediate bloodbath we detailed, is the lingering silence motivated by pure greed, or is it still, after all these years, motivated by the genuine primal fear of what happened to Marx, DiMuzio, Reisfelder, and Donati?
The only person who knew the truth took it to the grave.
What will it possibly take for the fear to dissipate and the final silence to break?